chat with you, Miss Emily. It's
Me too.
been so long since we've seen each other, even face to face. There's been emails that have gone back and forth between you and I.
Yes.
I don't think I've seen
Yes.
your gorgeous face for probably since the
Mm,
pandemic, I think. 'Cause
before
we haven't
COVID. Yeah,
oh,
absolutely. Yeah,
wow.
I miss seeing you in person.
I know, me too. Me too. And like I think what's so cool in what it sort of lends itself to what a small world like the social media trainers world is how long we've known each other and how our we keep intersecting in different
Yes.
places from when we used to teach like Camp Tech and then CMA and so and your name keeps
Yes.
popping up everywhere. I just every time I see your name is doing something, I'm like, there she is again, how she's
Aw.
juggling all the spinning plates, the juggling that you're doing. And
Well, thank you.
I think because I think I'm at least 10 years older than you are, that I've always been impressed that I'm like, you're this young thing, but I'm sure you probably don't feel so young anymore.
Starting to get some wrinkles. Not so young anymore, but thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. And same with you. You're doing this podcast, you're doing the CMA stuff, you're running your own business, you wear many hats, which are kind of all interconnected, which is nice in this business, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro because I mean, just because I know you doesn't mean that everybody else does. Even though I think everybody knows Emily Baillie, which I probably spell your name wrong on a daily basis.
You are not the only one, believe me.
So Emily Baillie is a powerhouse digital marketing educator. And you're also a consultant dedicated to helping Ontario-based organizations build their brand and attract new customers. And I know you of being the Instagram girl because that's where we met. Was you teaching all about Instagram? But you also provide strategic development and custom digital marketing training, with a focus on content. So we're going to talk a lot about content. You've worked with a lot of companies, including GlaxoSmithKline, Canadian Marketing Association, as we know, proud seed marketers, right? The Huron County Economic Development, Adoption Council of Canada, and Northern Ontario Travel, just to name a few. In addition, you also wear a hat as a professor at McMaster University and Humber College. And you're an industry liaison for the Bachelor of Digital Communications program at Humber College. And also, which I covet, I think it's so cool that you're a Hootsuite global ambassador. I just wanted the swag.
Yeah.
Didn't even need the bragging rights. But when I saw the Hootsuite swag, I was like, oh, mama wants some of that.
Yeah. The owls. The owls are very cute.
I know they are so cute. And I really know nothing about Hootsuite because I don't do any content management. So,
Mm.
um, even though I think with certain courses that we were teaching at the college that I teach at, we were trying to get them onboarding with Hootsuite and so forth. So I have a love hate relationship with schedulers, which maybe we can talk about a little bit because
Yes.
I do love them for the time management aspect of it. I'm a little nervous about them from a crisis management standpoint.
Yes, yes.
So
And that's smart. That's smart. I think we can use them to our advantage, but we don't want to be overly reliant on them because social media needs to be so responsive and things can happen. Global events occur and you don't want your scheduled tweets to come across at the wrong time and be in poor taste or even if that was not the intention. So I think you're onto something there.
well, I've seen it. I talk about those case studies of, say, I think it was Live Nation that had one with the Radiohead concert, which was a long time ago. But the fact that it was sort of scheduled when the stage had collapsed and it killed someone. And so those scheduled things can sometimes, you're right, they can seem tone deaf. And yet, in this 24-hour news cycle, when are we not dealing with a crisis? Quite frankly, there's
It's true.
so many things that are going on. It's challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, I've given you a whole list of questions I want to talk to you about, and I'm already pivoting
That's okay.
into the world of like the cancel culture and
Yeah.
in some ways, you know, people are getting more notoriety from the cancel culture, and so they're becoming famous because of the cancel culture and getting more anyway. So that's a
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard on the marketing people sometimes too, right? Because there's a lot of social media marketing folks out there who are brilliant, but in my opinion, like they need to have a life too. So you have to, at a certain point, this is my opinion, you have to be able to turn off the social media, and you have to have a life beyond social media. And that boundary is blurred for a lot of people, even more so now that we work from home, or many of us work from home almost entirely. So, there's a whole mental health piece there. Social media can be really bad for some people's mental health. I'm a big proponent of using it wisely and using it responsibly, and knowing when it's time to put the phone down or it's time to disconnect. So I do believe for some marketers in this field, it's become tricky because, like you said, there's that 24-hour news cycle. There's a lot of pressure to get it right. A mess up is a public one and can be damaging to a brand, damaging to one's career. And a lot of these folks are young and ambitious, and they're really trying to do their best at a lot of different parts of the job that don't necessarily get recognized. So there's a lot of pieces there to balance. And I hope that people are starting to recognize that social media marketers are not just people who write tweets all day. It's so much more than that. And the organizations that I've been able to work with, and pretty much any organization out there these days, I think is recognizing the value of having a strong social media presence. That doesn't mean you have to be on every single platform. I say this to clients all the time. You don't have to be on 5 or 6 different platforms. Like, choose 2 to start, or choose 2 or 3 and do them well, and forget about the rest for now. You don't have to hop on every trend, and you don't have to exhaust your resources, particularly if that's not even where your target audience is sort of spending their time.
100%. And it is overwhelming. And then it's sort of like, okay, so now the popularization of social media has been now 15 years, which to you and I has been like this. Meanwhile, my college students are like, well, I don't know anything more. That's my whole life. And they're they're grown adults at this point. And so having sort of said that, it's just interesting to sort of see the segmentation of certain ages. I never thought I was going to be an Instagram user. Here I am using it. Actually, I've deleted Facebook from my phone. I haven't sort of walked away completely from Facebook, and I'm getting this close.
Yeah, you and many others.
And it's the tracking that makes me nervous, even though Zuckerberg and Facebook and Instagram, they're saying, no, we don't track, we're not tracking your conversations. I literally was having a text conversation with someone yesterday about my son and him investing in cryptocurrency. And the next thing I know, I'm getting ads about cryptocurrency. I had one text conversation with one person, and then the ads are popping up. Could it be coincidental? Maybe. I don't know. I think we're seeing. I know, it's just making me more. Usually in the past, I would have been like, what do I care? I'm not doing anything wrong. But it's getting a little much. Like, it's getting a little it's getting a little much, where I'm like, and probably even to your point is, do I really need to be using all of these channels? Do they need to be accessible all the time? And then that goes into a whole conversation about dopamine, and that's something else that I'm like so fascinated with. Was following someone online recently who was talking about the fact that our attention spans were getting smaller, and the dopamine hits that we're getting anyway. So that's a whole
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this line of thinking that you're on, sort of wondering, do I need this? Is this benefiting me? How much is this really benefiting me and my family? I think that line of thinking is one that is starting to become more mainstream. And I think that's a good thing, because these tech companies, in my opinion, need to be accountable. They're so powerful. And these tools are also very powerful. They put the power to market your own business, your own brand into the hands of the user, who can literally have zero budget, but can have the wherewithal to make things happen. And I love seeing that. I love the ingenuity, the creativity, the entrepreneurship that comes to life on social media. But I also think there's a movement towards sort of conscious use of digital media. And I think we're going to see more conversations in that vein in the future, particularly as more studies come out, and the mainstream news is talking about this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, to your point though. I mean, the pendulum swings back and forth between like, this is an amazing thing versus this is a monster. And I think of, Vincent Cerf and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who are not everyday names for most people. But for people like you and I that teach this stuff, to think of like Sir Tim Berners-Lee having come up with the World Wide Web, and I think like, does he sit there and go like, I've created a Frankenstein, where there is like definitely pros to having created the technology, and then like, but then all of the negative stuff that comes along with it is a little horrifying. But I do love, to your point, of creating a forum for that levels the corporate playing field for small businesses to have a voice, to create their community. I think it's certainly been beneficial for a lot. So so Instagram specifically, that is a channel that people have now, as I see the next generation, people my age are still using Facebook, but my son's age at 15, he's not on Facebook at
No,
all.
no.
He,
Facebook is not cool if you're a teenager.
and I'm surprised to see him on Instagram even, because I know Snapchat, and he's funny because he really hates TikTok and he keeps deleting it from my phone.
Oh,
He's like, "Boomer, stop it." I'm like, like, first of all, I'm not a boomer, but also it's like I want to stay on top of what's going on in social media. But he's wildly embarrassed that I would ever even consider
aw.
playing with that channel at all. And so as we see them, I'm sort of curious, maybe what your opinion is on like how Facebook has changed its name to Meta.
Yes.
Where do you think Facebook's going to go the way of the dodo bird? I keep thinking, oh, I don't know. I keep seeing them reinvent themselves. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
but it's still there. 3 billion people in the world. You can't sort of say it's
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 still the most
still
it's still the
there.
most commonly used or the most frequently used
Mhm.
platform of all the social media platforms. So, I've had the same thought process as you, kind of wondering like, is this really gonna be around 2 years from now, or are people still going to be using it as much as they do? Certainly, other apps and other technologies have tried to sort of eclipse Facebook. It hasn't happened yet, but I think there's a number of factors at play here. This name change, so Facebook has changed its, or will be changing its name in the new year to Meta. And I think this is partly an attempt to rebrand and sort of perhaps lose some of that sort of negative press or negative sentiment that's come up around the company itself. And there's been a lot. I follow tech news, I follow social media news, and it's been brewing for some time. People starting to ask questions and say, "Hey, why are they doing things like this?" Or why are they putting the mental health of their users? Why are they not making that a priority when they know that Facebook and Instagram, which they also own, are not great for particularly young people and their mental health? And these are serious issues in our culture now that cannot be ignored. Parents are worried about their kids. The kids are going through a lot with COVID, or have gone through a lot with COVID, in North America and in other parts of the world. So I think they're trying. I think Mark Zuckerberg is a very smart guy. I don't agree with everything that he does, but I think that this rebrand could help sort of prolong the success of his company. And at the end of the day, he's trying to make money for his shareholders, right? So this is not a public service. This is not like a tool for benefiting the public. As much as we can use it to our advantage, we have to remember where he's coming from and where Facebook, the corporation, is coming from. So I think that it'll be interesting to watch. Would I like to see a completely different company come up and gain the type of popularity that Facebook has been able to garner? Yes, I think that would be amazing. I haven't seen it happen yet, though. So, we have to wait and see. And Facebook has been smart to snap up, these smaller companies that could have been their competitor. Instagram is a perfect example. They now own Instagram. So, there are some regulatory perhaps issues there at the government level that haven't quite caught up to present times. That's sort of my opinion. There aren't a lot of regulations. They're able to snap up all these potential competitors. So the landscape has a number of different sort of factors at play. It's super interesting to watch. But definitely young people are not using Facebook. Facebook is like not cool if you're a young person. Instagram is more popular with that demographic, absolutely. Will they be able to bring back some of those young users to the Facebook platform? I think they're going to try. I don't know if it will work. It'll be one of those things that they'll probably bring out some new features and see if people respond. And that's kind of how these apps function. You know, they add new technologies, they add new features, they add new sort of tools all the time to their platforms. As you know, if you log on, you're like, hey, this wasn't here before, right? I'm sure many of you can relate. And some of those catch on. And then some of them don't. And the ones that don't just sort of quietly sometimes fade away, and you almost forget they were there in the first place. So I think we'll see more testing. I think we'll see more features. I think we'll see more sort of effort on the part of Facebook, the corporation, to keep people stuck to the site for various reasons. But is it a long-term solution? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, do you, when you're advising your clients, I know, I mean, from a strategic standpoint, I struggle with telling anyone to be on Facebook because of being the small fish in the big pond now. 15 years ago, when I started working in social media, I was like, oh, this is, of course, this is the most amazing thing since sliced bread. 15 years later, unless a client is actually going to pay money for advertising, I can't not look at the fact that it's a powerhouse from an advertising perspective. But I wonder whether it's worth spending time. I mean, I don't know. And then,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a tough one.
My next question. I'm ready.
I think
I should let you answer the first question before I answer.
No, it's a great question. And if I were a business starting from scratch, I would consider Facebook, but I wouldn't always sort of go that route. So I think it really depends a lot on who your target customer is and what type of demographic they represent. If you're like a hip cupcake shop on Queen West, do you need a Facebook page? Probably not, and it takes time to build. So yes, the advertising options are pretty easy. They're pretty affordable for businesses of all sizes, nonprofit organizations, personal brands as well. But do you need to be there? I don't think so. Other clients that I work with have a fairly robust Facebook presence to begin with. In that case, I typically advise them, keep going, keep those people who are following you engaged with your brand, but also consider, investing some time, resources, and content in other platforms as well, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And hence, so when we first met, I don't even know if I had an Instagram page, Instagram profile, quite frankly. I don't even think I did. I was like, oh, that's for the young people. And of course, now I'm using it more than my Facebook account. I'm looking at Reels because I'm not allowed to have TikTok in my house. So, which Reels really are TikTok revisited, really. Those Reels are the same thing, just okay, so we'll take it there and we'll put it there and so forth. But is your focus still really on you were the Instagram, and every time I think of Instagram I think of you, but you're working with content across many channels, not simply just Instagram, or do you really still specialize in Instagram?
I typically specialize in 3 or 4 of the major platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn are usually the platforms that I work in. And I'll tell you why. A lot of my clients are small to medium-sized businesses or nonprofit organizations that are based here in the province of Ontario. And those 4 platforms are, for most folks or most organizations, are the best tools available to reach their particular audience. So we sort of traffic in those platforms, and I'm fairly well versed in all of them. I use them all regularly, but in different ways. So each platform has its own conventions, its own culture, its own style, its own approach.
Yeah, and the psychology, even why we're on it, is a very different. There are different reasons why the consumers are on it from a different standpoint.
Exactly. So everything's sort of customized to that. So yes, Instagram, I would say, is probably still my favorite. I like it the most out of all of them, and I use it a lot. But I've actually come back to Twitter a lot lately, especially during COVID. I thought a couple of years ago that Twitter was kind of fading away in popularity, but I was wrong. During COVID, a lot of people in my network found it super valuable, and the usage usage went up because people were getting that breaking news. People were getting, the updated numbers, the COVID numbers. Twitter is great for anything media related, news, sports, and that sort of thing. And that's the type of stuff people wanted to consume and consume quickly. So I've seen a little bit of a resurgence in Twitter, which is kind of cool to watch. But again, I love Instagram. I think it's a fantastic platform for most folks. And I'm a visual person. I like to see the images. I like to see the video. I like to see that story come to life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to say that I haven't spent any time on Twitter, so maybe I'll have to go back and take a look because I hadn't seen Twitter grow. So in 2008, I was a huge Twitter user, and I met so many people, and I would go to those kind of mommy blogging conferences way back then when we would all connect online, and then we would all get together in real life, and it was like this amazing sort of sorority of usually, like, they were mommy bloggers for the most part because that was a very influential community back then. And so, of course, I wanted to be in with the hip crowd, right? And now, years later, it's funny because my mom because she was watching, like, kind of wanted doing these, like, I hate Donald Trump, but I want to see what he's doing sort of stuff on Twitter, which is hilarious to sort of see that demographic. And now it's kind of like, my mom will never watch this. So, but she's kind of like with like, did you ever see So I Married an Axe Murderer, the movie with Mike Myers in it? And like the paper. And she says, oh, fetch the paper. And it's like, that's the Bible. So my mom will say, I saw on Twitter. I saw on Twitter that this. So like the Twitter is like the Bible as far as like, well, that is real news. If it's like, well,
yeah, it must be true.
I know. I sort of roll my eyes, like created a monster myself with having introduced my mother to Twitter. But yeah.
That's cute.
It is an interesting channel. I just didn't find, I think, at least maybe 5 to 10 years ago, I didn't find the conversation was there. But you're saying there's a resurgence of the conversations are happening again. To me, it became a very pushed medium where it was just people in this echo chamber of just like.
There's a bit of that. And I find that because I use these social media platforms personally, and I also use them for business, I get the two perspectives, right? I get the perspective of a consumer, and I also get the perspective of a marketer. And I find sometimes like social media can bring out a pretty negative side of people or a negative side of humanity. I'm not sure that that's going to change anytime soon, unfortunately, but there is a bit of that on Twitter. I find particularly in certain communities, but it all depends on who you follow. And the nice thing is, if you don't want to get content from a particular person or a particular brand, you can unfollow them, and then that's problem solved.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's sort of interesting so you focusing on content management, content creation, I think I sort of see the next generation of being far more comfortable with being this creator society. They're not as afraid of being in front of the camera as, say, someone from certainly my generation, and maybe like Gen X are terrified of being in front of the camera. Millennials are probably a little bit better, and then with Gen Z, they're like, what's the big deal? I want to be in front of the camera. I love it. I want that attention. It's really interesting to see how that's happening as those generations are continuing to grow.
Yeah.
Your little one, I'm sure, I don't know if you ever see that, because I just remember when my son was younger, I mean, he didn't really mind being in front of the camera so much, but I see all these, like, especially little girls being like, capture me now. How about now?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Right? Are you doing that with your daughter? Like, is that?
Well, before I had a child, probably like many parents, I thought I would do things a certain way. And then I had the child and I realized, wow, this is like hard. So she does know about phones. She likes looking on our phones, and it's really hard to keep her away from them. So my daughter is almost 2, and she knows how to flip through a photo album. She knows how to get rid of an alert. And we never taught her these things. They're, I think, intuitive in a certain sense. But the reason why she's interested, I think, is because we do take photos of her with our phone, right? Because grandma on both sides lives far away. So that's how we stayed connected during COVID. And we do FaceTime. So, we're kind of putting the phone in her face and going like, hey, say hi to grandma, and, cheering her on when she does cute things. Well, of course, she's going to want more of that, right? So it's like you think, oh, my child will never be using technology. And then you have a kid and then you're like, well, of course, like it's so hard to escape.
Yeah.
And then we're on our phones, like looking something up while we watch TV. And so it's difficult. I think I applaud the parents who are able to kind of keep their kids away from technology, but I also understand the folks that are just like, you know what, this is the world that we live in. It's not great for them probably to be on there constantly. They need to go outside at some point. But at the same time, you're right when you say these kids are growing up with this, and they're so comfortable on screen, maybe a little too comfortable in certain instances. So I hope that when she's a little bit older, she doesn't want to be like a YouTube star, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, right? That's like so popular and so common now. I think it's just all about moderation.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, it's this is a complete side note, but for me, it's a lot about raising my child with a sense of confidence that haters are going to hate, and that's just what's going to happen. And so I sort of see that as far as like that, like to your point about the mental health of all the social channels of there's gonna be trolls out there. There's gonna be like there's just people that just poke the bear for no reason at all. And so, in some ways it's about raising the next generation with this confidence level of like, you know what, there's gonna be people out there that are gonna try to bring you down no matter what you do. It's just harder, I think, because the scrutiny is so much more intense than ever before. It's always been there, but just having strangers or, and it's 24/7 too, because to be
Yeah.
back in the day when we were at school, if you had troubles at school, you walked away and then you had to wait till the next morning, and now it's just 24/7. But that's a whole other subject altogether. But
I know,
but
I know. There's so many different factors that play here when we talk about social media. It's literally changed everything in our culture. Not just on the marketing side of things, not just on the business side of things. I really think there's pros and cons. Like many things in life, nothing is perfect. We have to do our best as a culture and as parents and as marketers to use these tools in a positive way. And it's not perfect, but I strive to do better and sort of advise my clients to make the most of these tools and grow their business and grow their livelihoods. And a lot of them are really passionate about what they do. They just need a little bit of help figuring out how to translate that to these specific platforms and really sort of tell their story in a way that gets other people engaged. Like you said, it's really tough now, I think, in the sea of information for a brand to stand out, particularly if they're new and they're starting from scratch. But it's not impossible. We've seen people come up out of nowhere and just do amazing on a particular social media platform. And some of them are like, they pretty much just have an Instagram channel, and that's where they attract most of their, customers or most of their engagement. So anything is possible in this day and age. I believe that. And I think there is room for everyone to succeed.
well, okay, so and this is something. So the fact that you focus on content, the thing that I struggle too with is there's a sea of like meh out there, because if you're remarkable, if you do something different, then you have the possible consequence of people saying, "How could you do that? Why would you do that?" Is there, and I say this, I'm going to sort of put a caveat in first to sort of say, like, a lot of brands are afraid of making mistakes. So then they don't want to do anything different and remarkable and unique and,
Yeah.
and push the envelope for that fear
Yeah.
of that. So how do you encourage your clients to create, but no one wants to sort of like die in a sea of mediocrity also. So like, how do you find that with your clients? And can you push them
Yeah.
to say like, get out of your comfort zone, like do something different, it's not
Mhm, mhm.
easy. And if we had the secret sauce to it, Emily, then we
We'd
would
all be
all,
millionaires.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm lucky in the sense that when clients are ready to work with me, they're ready to work with me. So they are open to a new strategy, or they're open to a better way of doing things, or they're at least open to a discussion on that front. So I can usually tell, in a Zoom meeting, which is typically how it works now. When I talk with them, before I would take on a client, I would have a conversation about what they're looking for and what their expectations are, and what they've done in the past. And from that conversation, I can usually glean enough information to see if they are ready to put a new strategy in place, or are they ready to at least hear my perspective. Because if they aren't, then it's just not a great fit. So that's sort of step one. And then second, some people are ready to take big leaps, and then other people are sort of more like they want to dip their toe in the water, and then they want to see how that goes. And then if that goes well, then we can sort of build from there. So I'm pretty patient with people, and I like to give them options, and I can usually kind of sense what type of person they are, or at least the sort of decision maker of the team, what type of leadership style they have, so I can kind of adapt a little bit to that and work with them to figure out a solution that is actually going to work. If you throw too much at somebody and they're not ready for it, then it's not really going to work. Whereas if they're sort of open to trying something, but not everything, then we say, okay, let's make a plan. And our plan is, let's do this for, say, a month. And then after that month, let's check in and see how things are going, see how you're feeling. And almost 100% of the time, once they start seeing those positive results, then they feel a lot more comfortable, and they're a lot more open to kind of keep going. So content marketing is never a one size fits all. It's always about adapting and using that feedback loop to plan the next stage. So there's a lot of flexibility involved. And I think that adaptability, flexibility, nimbleness, whatever you want to call it, is what a lot of the best marketers possess, because they're not sort of fixated on, we have to do it this way. They're seeing, okay, what's resonating with our particular audience? What are they into? What's getting the click-throughs? What's getting the views? What's getting the comments, the shares, the participation, and what's not? And that in itself is a great indicator of how well your content marketing efforts are working. And if they're not working, then let's look at a way to change things up a little bit and try something new.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think that the trends are going to happen? Like, specifically, just to narrow things down, let's say Instagram. Where do you think things are going to, or do you think we're going to stay the course with Instagram? How do you think that that's going to change for maybe the next year or so?
Yeah, I think with Instagram, video is done really, really well, pretty much across the board, with the exception of IGTV. IGTV, I think, is going to sort of fade away. I don't think I'm not even sure if it's on most users' phones at this stage, but Reels have been doing quite well. And having those videos that are 1 minute or sometimes longer than 1 minute, I think have proven success for a lot of creators and a lot of marketers. And by the way, videos on Instagram don't need to be very long. So if there are some folks out here going, well, I'm thinking about trying video, but I'm not too sure if I could produce a 1 minute long video, you don't need to. 15 seconds is a great sort of benchmark to start with, I think. And I think we'll see more of that. I also think we'll see more interactive features. So, there's a lot of, albums, like carousel albums and things like that. Those do well because they can be used to tell a story and sort of present sort of like a collection. Instagram stories are still doing pretty well. I love Instagram stories. That's probably one of my favorite features on the particular platform. So I think that will hold steady. But I also think that because Instagram is part of the Facebook corporation, they could be sort of cooking up something behind the scenes that they haven't announced just yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about some new feature or sort of platform. But for now, I think the multimedia aspect of it, the storytelling aspect of it, that human to human connection, which a lot of people have been sadly lacking due to COVID isolation and things like that. Those human stories, those emotional pieces, that tends to be what really resonates with people. And I don't think that will change in the near future.
Do you like the stories because you get more data, or like I mean that's what I've always loved about sort of that story element of things was when because they've removed it from LinkedIn, but I always like that you could see who looked at it as opposed to
Yes.
generic.
Yeah, so juicy, right? I cannot help but look at who's viewed my stories. It's just so like tempting to see who's online and who's watching your Instagram stories. But I think what I like about them is that they're quick moving. You don't need to spend a lot of time on them. I'm a busy person and I'm often multitasking, so the format suits me well. If I'm standing in a checkout line and I have a minute to kill, I can go on there and see what folks are up to. And I personally like that it's not meant to be super polished. So Instagram posts generally, this is a generalization, but they tend to be a little bit more curated, a little bit more polished, and not in a bad way. That's great content. But sometimes I like to see, okay, if this is, say, a personal brand that I like to follow, what do they really like as a person? What do they, what does the inside of their house look like? It's like human curiosity. Do they have a pile of laundry in the back corner like I do sometimes? You know what I mean? It's like that connection, that human connection. Like it feels a bit more real to me as a consumer. And I also think as a marketer, it's a good tool because, I say to my clients, you don't have to be perfect on your Instagram stories. Like, don't spend too much time on it. You don't need to have everything perfectly placed. You don't necessarily have to have professional level photography on there. Like a smartphone is enough. Most people have a pretty good camera on their smartphone at this point. So just take advantage of that. So for small businesses in particular, I think it can be a really fun tool for them to sort of help illustrate what their business is all about and illustrate that story. I keep coming back to storytelling, but people want to know, why are you in this business? Why did you open this business? What motivated you? What's your passion, and where did that come from? That's the type of thing that I'm interested in. And I don't think I'm alone in that. Again, it's like that human storytelling piece.
100%. And I think that that's often overlooked when it comes. So that's why people come to you, is because of that storytelling piece. I couldn't do what you do because I'm not that great of a visual. I can't conceptualize things visually. I keep thinking, oh, I'm going to do this. Like when I buy something to support a friend's business, and then I try to want to stage it. I'm not a good photographer by any stretch of the imagination. I do my best, but that's not my channel of choice because that's not where my clients are. But having said that, there's a lot of people who are great at doing that storytelling aspect of things. And I think as a society, our attention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. In fact, I can't even tell you, Emily, the last time I actually sat down and read a book, because I'm auditory. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Sitting down and reading is not something that I've done in a while. So Instagram, from that standpoint, from that visual storytelling aspect of things, is quick. It's like easy. It's like the old way of like when some of us, I never did, getting those tabloids of like, or People magazine really was the one that I would subscribe to, or not subscribe, but get them, because I like that short burst of information. And so now social media certainly replaced, sadly, the way magazines and other print medium, because we have access to information here.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
you might even see the same thing with your students. I was really shocked to see that one of my students years ago, she was telling me, oh, I follow CBC on Snapchat. And I was like an archaic institution, or like, like sort of a conservative traditional institution like CBC. I was shocked that that's how my student was getting her news information. I was like, wow, that's an eye opener.
Yeah. And that's smart of CBC to have a presence there, because that's where they reach folks like your student, right? Otherwise, that student probably maybe wouldn't have consumed the news from CBC. They would have found another source. So those media companies, it's been a tough go for some of them as well. But in some ways, they've been able to pivot and meet their users or meet their audience where their audience is already spending time. So, your student, shared that interesting fact. And I think that just proves that, as brands, as marketers, like whatever it is you're trying to sell or whatever message you're trying to get across, like you need to think like your target customer. And you're not going to be able to get inside the minds of everyone, but if you can think about sort of a typical customer, if you have one, then you can think about, okay, what are their habits? Like, what social media do they typically use? How much time would they spend on these platforms? And tailor your plan to fit that, along with all the other marketing pieces. Like, I also do blogs. I also, can advise on a website, like what needs to be on your website. That's a huge piece that sometimes gets overlooked. But all of these pieces, they need to work together, along with email marketing programs and, all the other fantastic, digital and offline marketing too. Like, just because everything's digital now doesn't mean that referrals and word of mouth don't matter. They do. And businesses can still be built partly on that. So I think there's all these different pieces, and each case is different. Each client is different. It's all about sort of maximizing their presence in ways that is the most meaningful to them and the most meaningful to their end user.
And I think that's what's so important too, is that strategic, holistic view. And I think a lot of small businesses, without your help, are just sort of taking things and throwing it at the wall and seeing if it's going to work. But if they're not looking at it from a holistic perspective, which is what you bring to the table, is looking at that strategic perspective of looking at it holistically, of like, okay, so let's meet them where they're at, as opposed to trying to get them to come to us. Let's go to them and figure out from that standpoint too. And that's, as you said, like, that's not easy, as we know with the Canadian Marketing Association. That digital isn't even really that much of a silo anymore. It is marketing, because and so marketers have a tough task of managing all of the elements, as we look at offline, online, and then digital is its own piece to it, and then social media, it's another piece. Like, there's just so many pieces.
It's a big job. It's a big job.
It's a big job.
There's a reason why, successful companies have a really robust marketing department, because marketing is so important to the function of any organization. Whether you're small, medium, or large, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a personal brand, it needs to make up a good chunk of your resources and efforts. So, there are certainly ways to approach it that are less costly and perhaps more feasible for smaller businesses. And then, the folks who are a little bit more established, or they're the bigger businesses, oftentimes they have the luxury, I call it a luxury, of being able to hire those big companies, those agencies, and so on. So, I always say, start where you're at, and let's look at the next phase based on budget, based on needs. And I've had the good fortune of working with all different sizes of organizations, small, medium, and large corporations. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They're all, at the end of the day, they're all people trying to do the best they can in a constantly changing environment, and it's a lot to keep up with. I've had people say, I feel a bit overwhelmed by the volume of information and the speed of change. And I completely understand that. That's why courses like the Chartered Marketer program that you and I teach in, Leslie, and I teach at McMaster and Humber as well. There's so many amazing programs out there now. There's boot camps, there's online courses, there's so much out there, because there's now a need for it. People are seeing, I think, that there's a sort of constant learning curve, and it's a little bit like chasing the horizon. But if you thrive in that type of environment, then it can be really exciting.
It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me, as I have been doing this for, I can't believe, 20 years. I've been in digital, having worked with Stephen Gigliotti way back in the year 2000, 1999, 2000. And seeing how technology has evolved, is going to continue to evolve, and how mass media is, for all intents and purposes, is kind of dead. That everything's micro now, these micro niche audiences, and it's going to continue to get more niche. It becomes that much tougher for the marketer, because we have to understand more than just the channel we're sitting on, but what's next, what's new, and is what we're doing important, like, for that audience. Do you need to do business to business in a TikTok environment? I don't know. There's, it depends.
Yes. Yeah.
And
There's never a straight answer.
never a straight answer. And I think one of the things that, from my experience, that small businesses have a tendency of overlooking, and I'm sure that this is something that you reinforce them, is looking at those metrics.
Yes.
Because just because people will say, oh, I need to be on Facebook or I need to be on Instagram because everybody's on there, and it's, I don't know if you get the same annoyance that I get this, it's free advertising. Does that make you crazy? That makes me crazy when my students will say it's free advertising. It's syntax, but it drives me crazy. But looking at those metrics are so important. It's somebody like yourself that looks at it from that perspective of, is this really working?
Yeah. I think we all have to be considering those metrics tools, and a lot of them are built into the major social media platforms. So there's really no excuse to not access those data or that data regularly. I like looking at how a post has done, particularly if I'm the one that created it. Like like to look at who's watching my Instagram story. I'd like to see how many views, how many click-throughs. I guess I'm curious by nature, but if you don't have the time to do that every single time, that's okay. But you want to maybe put a note in your calendar, let's say, or have a weekly or monthly reporting system where you're comparing your engagement from week over week, month over month, year over year. And what you want to see is some steady growth. You want to see that you're on an upward trajectory. Not every single post is going to be a hit. That's okay. But you want to make sure that overall your efforts are trending in the right direction. If they're kind of declining, then that's something we want to look into. It may be a case of, the algorithm having changed, and what you were doing last year just isn't working this year. It may be a case of, just organic reach declining, and that's across the board. But there are a lot of other tactics that we can talk about that may be feasible, and some of them can be implemented right away. So there's a lot of sort of formal and informal social media tactics that clients may use or may wish to try. And again, let's try it. Let's see how things go in a month or so. And then we can assess from there.
Yeah, and I think that sort of is, because I don't love looking at metrics. I'm not a numbers kind of gal. I love the storytelling, but I'm a little bit more of a written storyteller as opposed to sort of a visual one. But looking at those metrics are important to that very point of, like, if you don't know if it's working, and yet I know a lot of small business owners, particularly of a certain age or demographic, will think, well, I've checked off the box. I've put it up on Facebook. I've put it up on LinkedIn. In fact, I've pushed back on quite a few clients, particularly in the financial services industry, financial advisors specifically, that have said, I need to be on Facebook. And I'm like, sure, if you just want to send me your money, that's fine. But I don't think that this is a viable channel for you unless you're willing to keep it up to nurture the beast, so to speak. And so, is this a viable channel for you? There's a lot of things that go into it, but unless they're willing to either invest in somebody like yourself to keep the content alive and manage the metrics to make sure what's still working and get participation and engagement, then really what's the point? But I think some people just think, oh, it's just a checklist, and I'll just add it to
Yeah, unfortunately, some people that I do encounter still have a little bit of that. I call it like an old school mentality. They don't necessarily understand that to be successful on social media, you need to be social. It's not like traditional marketing where you deliver your message, people consume it, and that's the end of it. You walk away and hope you'll have more sales or whatever you're trying to accomplish. With social media, there's an expectation, I think, amongst most users that brands are very responsive. So if you comment, if you complain, if you just do anything really in terms of commenting, let's say, there's an expectation that the brand is responsive. So if they completely ignore your question and or don't maybe thank you for saying something nice about your experience with their business, then that's a bit of a miss, right? And people remember that. That's that human element that needs to be there. So sort of just putting stuff out there and not really being engaged isn't really probably going to get folks too far. And social media managers, guys, I know you're out there. You know that a lot of extra hours are spent, monitoring those feeds and replying to people and getting answers for people if you don't have the answer yourself. So it's a big job, and it's a job that encompasses many different functions and touches many different parts of the business, because this is the storefront, so to speak, for a lot of brands. This is the place that people go when they want more information, or if they're ticked off about a bad experience. They'll take it to social media. So you need to be ready to respond to those people, and it's an excellent opportunity to engage your customers and bring them closer to your brand, get them excited about what you're doing, and that can really benefit you in the long run. It's not a short-term play. It doesn't sort of translate into sales immediately. People who approach it with that mentality are going to be disappointed, but it's a longer play. So brands that can do social media well, I think, are set up for success in the medium and long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And so are there any brands that you think right off the hop, or the ones that your students are sort of seeing in class? I have a few, but that are doing Instagram or doing social well?
That's a great question. I really like what the June Motel has done.
Mm.
So for those who aren't familiar, the June Motel is these two female entrepreneurs who are, I think, based in Toronto or somewhere in Ontario,
Prince Edward
have
County, not too
Prince
far.
Edward County. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. They started up a motel called the June Motel, and they recently expanded to a second location. Their second location is in Sable Beach, and this is where my family has a cottage. So I've been going to Sable Beach since I was born. So it's been really cool to see the evolution. They took a rundown motel that it hadn't been touched in years. They sort of revitalized it and turned it into a viable business quite recently, and also during COVID. So I believe their handle is at June Motel or at the June Motel. I think if you did a quick search, you would find it. But what I like is that the brand is very distinct. They have a specific color palette that's reflected across all of their marketing and on their location. They use Instagram a lot. They upload a lot of Instagram stories, and they bring you behind the scenes. So while they were building the motel, while they were renovating this motel, they were showing you what could be coming and getting you sort of excited and doing some storytelling and talking about places that inspired them, motels and other places that inspired them. And I think they probably had a lot of photography done. I don't know if they did it themselves or if they had a photographer on hand, but there was a lot of really good imagery of the location, of the features. Their motel itself has sort of social media moments built into it, so little spots around the property where that are ideally set up for folks to take selfies and share them on their own social media platforms, which is so clever. And they also, on top of their successful Instagram page and other marketing channels, they also recently had a Netflix series come out, which again brings another platform into the mix. So I think they're very clever marketers, and I'm happy to see female-led brands succeed. I'm happy to see old tired businesses sort of breathe new life into them, and independent businesses. I like to see them succeed too, particularly after COVID, where we did unfortunately lose a lot of independent businesses, or small businesses have struggled a lot. So it's nice to see a success story.
I love that. And you're right. I think when I think of the June Motel, I think of it as a destination that is very Instagram friendly, because friends that I know that have gone have had that experience. And so you're right, it is very visual. Another brand to take a look at, and I have to go and see now that it's like we're sort of hopefully at the end of the COVID, and things are starting to open up. I'm going to go back to Trias. My friend who works there, she started out as a client and now she's one of my favorite people in the whole world, is the brand manager for Trias. And so they've really created that Instagram where I don't know if you're nodding, so I assume that you've seen at least some stuff if you haven't been on in their location to see those Instagram worthy moments.
Yeah, that's a great one too. There's so many out there. I mean, I feel, I feel remiss not mentioning more, but it doesn't have to be the most fancy type of business to have a great Instagram channel. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a designer. You don't have to be a fashionista. You don't have to look like $1 million every day to have a great Instagram. I think, again, people just really want that, hi Jess, they really want that human connection.
Yeah, I don't think I could do it. I don't have that visual. I don't have that visual. That's not my superpower. I think you have to have a really good superpower to be able to create beautiful things with a very visual channel like Instagram, whether it's a video or pictures. So that's certainly not my wheelhouse. I like, as I said, I like the aspect of things. But yeah, it's. I mean, when I see it, and when I see those moments, the June Motel is a perfect example. That those storytelling makes it more. It draws you in. Certainly makes me want to go to that place because of the experience that somebody else has enjoyed that experience. They've taken the picture. It looks amazing. And I'm like, okay, I want to go there too. It's not too far away from where I'm living. So I really ought to go. But it's that and the Drake that are really making the Prince Edward County now a draw, not just, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I can't believe we're getting close to the hour talk. So I do really want to know a little bit about how you got involved in your career in the first place, and how have you, because you've always, to me, as somebody I see as being very, I wanted to say bold at first, but you always seem to be very confident about the knowledge that you have. I love that so much. And so you've because when I met you, I always figured you were this young punk in a good way.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, it's a compliment because you're very self-assured and very knowledbed.
Thank you.
And we've known each other a long time, so you're not the you're not the like bright eye. You're not as young as
as I used to be. Yeah,
I think you were like in your 20s when we first met, and I was like, "Look at you go, girl! You're teaching."
Oh, well,
like
thank you.
You really, for a 20-year-old, I think you were 20 when we first met. Like you were in your 20s, certainly. I think because it's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, I forget the exact date, but yeah, it's been nice, to have a friend in the industry that I've known for so long. That's always great. So I used to be quite shy. And when I was a kid, I was super shy. When I was a teenager, I wasn't super shy as a teenager, but I would say I was a little bit afraid of like making those bold moves. And I worked in the 9-to-5 world in various communications roles for quite a few years before I struck it on my own. And I think that's a good thing because you learn how things work in different environments. You become confident in the work itself before you take on the additional piece of running a business, because there's a lot more to learn, as you know, with that. It's not always so easy. But I think I just reached a point in my career, in my life, where I was like, what do I have to lose? If I reach out to these folks, say I reach out to like 5 different people and say, hey, I'm looking for this next opportunity, or hey, can I have some of your time and advice? I'm interested in doing what you do. I'm like, you know what? If I reach out to 5 people and like 2 of them get back to me, that's fine, because those other 3, they're busy. They have their own stuff and they don't know me anyways. So I don't take that personally. So I think I just reached a point where I was like, it's worth trying at least, and that has kind of fueled me. So if I, when I decided to open up my own business, I sort of said to myself, okay, I'll try it. I'll do it for a year. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll go get a job, like a 9-to-5 job. And that made me not so stressed or not so fearful to take that risk. And then with the teaching, the same thing. I reached out to some schools. I did some guest lectures. I tried to learn as much as I could about what teaching is really like to make sure that it was for me. And then when an opportunity did come up, I got in touch with the right person, and we had a meeting about it. And then from that first course I was hired onto, I could then say to other schools or other departments, hey, I have some experience, not a ton of experience, but enough to kind of get me in the door. And hi, Stephen, thank you for your nice comment there. Stephen Gigliotti from CMA is tuning in. We're so happy that he's here with us. Leslie and I
And
get to work with him.
and Stephen, and if you're just jumping in now, we've already tooted the horn of the Chartered Marketer program a few times already.
Yes, yes. Check it out, charteredmarketer.ca. And same with the CMA. I took the initiative to sort of join a council in the CMA. I sort of applied to join that council, and that was a really great opportunity to do a little bit of networking. I think the word networking scares people because it has a little bit of a negative connotation. But for me, I think I reached the point where I was like, you know what? I actually like talking to people. I actually like meeting people in my industry. Not everybody's going to be my best friend, but that's okay. I've actually made some really wonderful connections, and I like talking to people in our industry because they're so interesting. There's people who are into everything under the sun, introverts, extroverts, lots of diversity, which is fantastic. So, you get to have a bit of you can socialize with those people and keep in touch. So I enjoy that piece. And I think that that's a really important part of anyone's work. You have to like it. You're not going to maybe love it every single day, all day long, but I think you have to have those pieces that get you excited and get you out of bed in the morning. And I guess I just reached, to answer your question, I just reached the point where I was like, well, heck, I might as well ask. And like, what's the worst that could happen? And then it sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah, because that's really the reason why I started this podcast in the first place. It was really sort of a combination of some of my best friends who are speakers were like, come on, you should be doing this. I'm like, all right, like with COVID and now it's these kinds of interactions can be certainly much more accessible of interviewing people that I really adore and are great speakers that I know, combined with the fact of this aha moment writing the LinkedIn profiles that I do for the senior executives and other people that I write the LinkedIn profiles for, realizing how many people feel this imposter syndrome of putting themselves out there and the fear of that. And from the moment I met you, you never seemed to have any kinds of fears of putting yourself out there. I'm sure you have, like,
yeah
the
yeah
internal.
like anyone, I'm not confident all the time, and sometimes I go like, am I doing the right thing? And I'm happy that people are talking more about this, because then you don't feel so alone when you have those moments. I know successful entrepreneurs who have said to me in private, that they still ask themselves how many years later they still wonder sometimes, should they just give it all up and go work for someone else. So I think there's pros and cons, and we can't assume that we know what's going on in anyone's sort of situation behind the scenes. But like I said, if you can find something that fuels you, and if you can find something that you like, maybe not love all the time, then I say to my students, like, I think that's your sort of guiding light.
Yeah, and it can be your superpower. It's finding, you're right, like it's finding something that you're really driven and passionate about. And you and I love people. And to that same point, actually, I was interviewing a gal named Despina last week about networking. And we both acknowledged, even as extroverts, that we hate the idea of networking, because I hate the idea of going into a place that I don't know anybody. And then I'm the last person to leave. I'm like the worst.
Yeah, because you're having a blast, right?
I'm like, oh, I love meeting all these new people. Meanwhile, every time I go into a new situation, I dread it. I'm kicking and screaming the entire time. And then afterwards, I'm like, what was I so afraid of? But it is that fear of rejection. I think the same thing about putting ourselves out there, whether it is Instagram, LinkedIn, any of these other channels, of putting ourselves out there, is still a terrifying idea for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
Get out of
human
our,
nature. I think
yeah.
that's human nature. It's just like dating, right? It's like you might meet somebody online that you think is fantastic, and then it comes time to meet them in person. You're nervous because you don't know exactly what you're going to get. I think like everybody feels that fear. Even people who are very experienced and come across as very confident, except those people who are like overconfident. And then those people I'm suspicious of. I'm like, what's going on behind the scenes there? So, you take it all with a grain of salt. And I have my family, which I love. And, I try to spend a lot of time outdoors, which kind of for me is like a good balance to the digital and the tech forward nature of what I do. And so for me, that just sort of helps me keep some perspective.
Yeah. And I think so for me, I think it's, doing it in the moments that I feel like I've got this. Like I have to sort of be in the moment of going like, what, and it's I've taken neurolinguistic programming too. So it's like the self-limiting beliefs and then going, okay, Leslie, like what are you so afraid? Like what is at the core of what you're really afraid of? And is it true? Or is it me just holding myself back because I'm afraid of what other people think? And like people are sometimes just gonna not like me. And as a people pleaser, this is it's terrifying. Um,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's kind of okay because I don't like everybody either.
Yeah,
Watch
and
out.
that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. Not everybody is going to be everyone's cup of tea. I think like we live in a world where we need more kindness and more compassion for other people, but everyone's on their own path. So, marketing has brought me some really wonderful connections, friends, valued coworkers, valued clients. So I feel grateful for that. And I find if I'm more grateful, then I'm sort of more positive. And when you're more positive, you attract more sort of positive things to your life. I know it sounds a little woo woo, but I do sort of believe in I guess it's the law of attraction, really. So, if I'm feeling kind of a bit like down or a bit bummed or like, oh, what am I doing? I'll read a book or I'll listen to a podcast or I'll, check out some content from a person that I look up to or a person that is like really successful in my books. And if they're open and if they're honest, sometimes they'll often share stuff on their social media, for example, about, their perspective. And then sometimes that gives you a little bit of a lift.
100%. And I also think when we're coming from a place of service too, that helps to reframe that it really isn't all about me. It's about trying to educate and empower and entertain my network of people that I'm really trying to help them. It just gets me right out of my own way because it really isn't about me at the end of the day. It is about helping. That's what I thrive in is like, let's just cheerlead and try to get people out of their own way to tell their story. So that's where it all begins. So thank you so much, Emily. So how can people reach you if they want to employ you for your services and or just follow you on your channels? How can people reach you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Emily Baillie Social. You can find me on Twitter at Emily Baillie. And my email address is emily@compasscontent.ca. You can drop me a line if you have any questions. And thank you so much, Leslie, for hosting this and organizing this. It's so nice to see your face in person soon, I hope. Yay! And thank you so much to all the folks who tuned in today and are watching this. It's great to connect with you, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and so Baillie is not spelled. You tell people how to spell Baillie.
Yes, thank you for raising that. I have a
Yeah.
very incorrectly spelled name, or frequently incorrectly spelled name. My surname is Baillie, and I spell it Baillie. So a lot of people get that one wrong, but thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, it's funny because even with you think my name would be very common, but I get Hug Hess, Hughes, Huggy. So even with a name like Hughes, I still have to spell it for people as well. So yeah, so Baillie, I think I forget the first I, the
Right. Yeah.
Baillie. I think I usually forget that first I.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll see my photo and you'll recognize me on social.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Miss Emily. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Stephen Gigliotti. Thank you for joining us here too and giving us a little shout out. And are these your students, Danival, or connections of yours, Jess? They're connections of yours, maybe, because I don't know if I know them. And if
Thanks for joining, guys.
yeah,
Great to see you.
joining. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Emily. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care. Bye.